So now, ladies and gentlemen, live and in color, it's Mr. Wayne Love Juice.
The other day I produced a Louis, had a chat with an interesting chappie who said that the YouTube algorithms really aren't that happy. If a channel only broadcasts once a week, so we decided we could texture whenever we've got a piece of news in our new book on the track extra. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is John Downs. I'm the director of the Centre for Fortean Zoology, and this young lady here is my cat, Lilith Tinkerbell. And the two of us want to welcome you to another episode of On the Track Extra. What's On the Track Extra, you might ask? Well, every Saturday afternoon at 3, we bring you a half-hour show called On the Track, which is a collection of stories about hard science, weird shit, and surreality. I'm not going to bother to explain what surreality is, because if you don't know by now, you never will.
Stop being a disagreeable old man, Daddy, and tell the boys and girls what surreality is. Hint, it might have something to do with the talking cat.
However, every Wednesday evening at 6:30, we bring you a supplemental show which is about a quarter of an hour long, and it covers the same sort of stuff. And this is the latest one of these. And this week we're going to be talking about the country of Chad. As regular viewers will know, quite often in these shows I disappear down various rabbit holes. However, I do want to clear the air here and say that I am not comparing myself to a pretty teenage Edwardian girl who had a maths teacher called Charles Dodgson, but the rabbit holes are rabbit holes nonetheless, and each of those rabbit holes is dug by, or at least has me pushed down by, a different white rabbit. And this week's white rabbit is my old friend Daisy, Miss Daisy, all the way from Germany. Thank you for this one, Daisy. It's an absolute corker. Chad is a landlocked country in Central Africa. It's named after Lake Chad, which, when it was discovered by the Romans in the 1st century of their empire, they called the Lake of Hippopotami and Rhinoceroses. My parents explored the marshes on the Nigerian edge of Lake Chad in the mid-1950s. My father was then working for the Colonial Service Agricultural Department and was doing a survey of the different sorts of wild rice that were found in those marshes, with recommendations for which ones could actually be cultivated. But Chad is one of those strange countries that nobody really seems to know much about. It's one of the poorest countries in the world and one of the least developed. It's got all sorts of wonderful wildlife, and as you would have heard from Richard Muirhead when he and Richard Freeman were discussing it some weeks ago, that there are stories even of a mysterious cat called the Tigre de Montagne, the mountain tiger, which is allegedly some sort of saber-toothed cat which has survived until the present day. However, as far as I'm aware, it's only known from hearsay and nobody's been to look for it, and because of The difficulties of travelling in Chad: there are a lot of bandits and brigands. It's not a very easy place to explore, and so, quite sensibly, most Western cryptozoologists have had the sense to stay away. However, whether or not there are saber-toothed tigers still lurking in the mountains of Chad, there are many other cat species to be found there. Let's have a quick look at this list here. And it is one of these species, the lion, or rather the population of lions found in one particular national park in Chad, which is the subject of today's story. This is the Sena National Park in Chad. Over 700 square kilometres of open forest, tall trees, scrubland and bushes. And it is the home for many creatures. But as the park was only established in 2010 after a refugee crisis in the region, it was too late for the resident lion populations, because there haven't been lions there for about 20 years. Until now there is. When you look at it, this is a story that's very simple and very short. No lions there for 20 years. Now there's one lion being photographed on a camera trap. But it's more complicated than that. The important thing is, where did the lion come from? Is it the beginning of a new population of lions in the region, or is it the remains of an old population that had been overlooked? It's a very similar set of questions to those that have to be asked since the CFZ expedition to Sumatra back in September, when they photographed and filmed a tiger in a part of the country where no tigers had ever been recorded ever. The important thing is not to say, oh yeah, we've got a lion now, and then move on. It's to find out why, where and how there is a lion there, and what can be done to encourage lions to make their home in the national park once again, if indeed they ever left. And now we have a continuity error of massive proportions, because when I filmed the last sentence I was wearing a jumper and it was Sunday afternoon. It's now Wednesday evening and I'm looking very cool in my leather jacket. But enough of my sartorial prowess. Let's take an in-depth look at the story. A team of conservationists from the government of Chad and the Wildlife Conservation Society have released a picture taken by a remote camera of what they describe as a beautiful lioness in her prime and clearly in great health, in the country's Sena National Park. This is a very big deal because lions have been considered to have been extinct there since at least 2004, according to an IUCN assessment. The national park where the photo was taken is part of the Boubenjida Sena region along the Cameroon-Chad border. It's an area which saw lots of poaching more than a decade ago, but there have been improvements after the governments of both Cameroon and Chad moved to do more for wildlife conservation. The inception of the national park dates back to the mid-1980s when, after a civil war, a large part of the eastern civilian population arrived in the quieter region of the west. With the increase in population, the pressure on the country's natural resources was reflected in a decline in forestry, in overfishing in lakes and rivers, and in soil fertility. To counteract this, in 1995, authorities and local natives signed the Dari Agreement to protect the forest in the region. In 2002, the Ministry of the Environment and Regional Administration of Chad agreed to select an area to transform it into a nature reserve. The project was funded by the German Society for International Cooperation and a French company. In 2007 it was decided to declare the area of the Sena Ura National Park under Law 14 and to contribute to the development of a transboundary biosphere reserve together with the nearby Buva and Jida National Park in Cameroon. In 2008 the National Parliament approved this law, and after 2 years of preparation, in 2010 there was the official start of the national park. And this has led to better protection of the national parks and wildlife populations, which are now beginning to recover. I know that story sounds relatively straightforward, but it's actually anything but. When you scrape beneath the surface, the complexities of this story are absolutely magnificent. First of all, you have cooperation between two different African countries, which is something that one would wish happened more often. The two countries have worked together and produced two sister, if you like, national parks which join together with the border of the two countries running straight through the middle. There are no border controls, as one can find out, and the animals can roam freely between the two areas. And this answers the question, where did the lion come from? Well, it looks almost certain that she came over the border from Cameroon, where lions are far more populous. But it also means that on the Chad side of the border, the circumstances which made it impossible for lions to continue living there 20 years ago seem to have abated, and at least one lion, and this is where it also gets quite interesting, because the World Conservation Society have suggested that although there's an image of only one lion, that lions do move in family groups called prides, and it's very likely that there are more lions in the area, which means that there seems to be no reason why lions can't recolonize this area of Chad, which is a fantastic thing. But this is now the weirdest thing of the lot. I said earlier in this show that the inception of this nature reserve goes back to the mid-1980s, 1985 precisely, where there had been a lull in the Civil War and refugees had moved into the western part of the country. What I didn't realise until about half an hour ago, when I was looking for photographs that I could use of the Civil War, that the Civil War is still continuing. There is still, as there has been on and off since the 60s, an ongoing battle between the Muslims in the north and the Christians in the south. And this has been going on all the way through the inception and the construction of this national park. And this, I think, is something absolutely wonderful, that despite the fact that people are continuing to do what people do best, which is fight each other and kill each other, the government are still managing to put together a national park, and a national park with the arrival of this lion or group of lions in the country shows that it appears to be being a very successful project. Well done, Chad, is what I say. Well done indeed.